Hi, welcome to Botbrack, Box on the Box, Rock and Celluloid. Remember to share and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. So I'm going to do another top 10 today of one of the filmmaking greats, Alfred Hitchcock. Can't remember when I first stumbled across Hitchcock, but I was probably very young, 4, 5, 6 years old. I'd imagine there was a film on, we started watching it, and perhaps a parent said, "Oh, is this a Hitchcock, or this is directed by Alfred Hitchcock," or something like that. Prior to that, and moving on from that, Hitchcock was the only filmmaker I was aware of. Someone who basically had a name, and that their contribution behind the camera and their name was as important as the stars in it. Later on, as I got more into film, I started watching films by Sidney Lumet, Sam Peckinpah, Stanley Kubrick, people like that. But Hitchcock was the first one, other than Sergio Leone as well, where his name was as important as the stars in it. So Hitchcock's probably the first filmmaker to be taken seriously by the French critics. Truffaut, Chabrol, Jean-Luc Godard, when they're writing for Café de Cinema. And they came up with the concept of the auteur theory. So the idea that a director can have authorship, can have a style, a visual style and thematic style, ideas that you find turning up in different films, and they produce a body of work. They're not merely hacks, their films connect somehow. If we think of a modern example, Quentin Tarantino was an auteur that kind of on his first film. He was kind of more important than the stars in it. Christopher Nolan's another one. When a Nolan comes out, people tend to go, the new Christopher Nolan film's out, not necessarily the people starring in it. In actual fact, his last two films haven't had very big stars in. Okay, so what were the ones that Hitchcock? It's one of those things. Hitchcock doesn't make bad films. He doesn't make uninteresting films. I would say there's three sort of levels of Hitchcock. There's some of the greatest films ever made, Hitchcock. There's kind of second level Hitchcock that's like really, really good. And most directors would kill to make a film as good as that. Then there's third level Hitchcock, not as good as yours, but still something interesting in it. For instance, a film like Stage Fright from 1950, little known now, but it's got a lying flashback sequence. Lifeboat, some people would really like Lifeboat, but it's all set on the boat, These films maybe aren't as highly thought of now, but they're always interesting. I think maybe Jamaica Inn, actually, his last British film, maybe one where people are like, oh, Jamaica Inn. I must confess I'm not familiar with Hitchcock in the silent era, although I'm aware with clever visuals on the lodger with the foot in the sort of ceiling, the clear ceiling, with the guy, the killer walking. And then his use of sound in Blackmail, his first sound film with the use of the word knife being brought up on the soundtrack. So the thing with Hitchcock tells stories with images. That's what's amazing about him. The moving image, the editing is what tells the story. The dialogue is to move on, and the dialogue and characters are kind of to move on the visual story. He's a truly cinematic filmmaker, hugely influential. I mean, pretty much. Spielberg, Fincher. You could go through any number of filmmakers who are influenced by Hitchcock. He's probably the most influential filmmaker of all time. Actually, I don't think that's a hyperbole. I think Hitchcock probably is. Hitchcock to me is kind of cinema in a way, if you had to kind of define it. So which films didn't make the cut on my top 10? Well, his first really great film's The 39 Steps from 1935. I love this, and the fact it's an old film doesn't really matter. Even though it's got some rickety elements, it's still top. Robert Donat's great. I love Mr. Memory, and this begins what's called the wrong man plot. It's where a guy's accused of something he hasn't done. I mean, people just don't use this plot now. The Fugitive, the TV show uses the wrong man plot. It's Will Smith. Enemy of the State is the wrong man plot. A girl, usually a guy, gets accused of something and they go on the run and have to prove their innocence. Really good. It's got John Laurie as well in it briefly, I think, from Dad's Army. So really like it. I actually like the remake of Robert Powell as well. Then his first American film, Rebecca's really good. I think maybe why this didn't quite make the top 10, you can feel the influence of David O. Selznick on this. It's a Hitchcock, but it's not Hitchcock through and through. It's a little tethered. It's like a bit like Kubrick was with Spartacus. But really good. really good story, belching. Joan Fontaine and Olivia are very good, and it's got that great opening that Wells kind of copied for the opening of Citizen Kane. Last night I went to Manderley. Then a couple of 50s ones. An interesting one is The Wrong Man. I said The Wrong Man plot before. This is literally Henry Fonda. He gets accused of murder or robbery. He gets locked up in jail, and it's going to go to trial, and he hasn't done it. But it's done more in a documentary style. It's based on, I think it might be a newspaper article. But it's interesting. Is it Vera Miles is in it, who Hitchcock was trying to kind of make into a star by then, but I don't think she was having any of his manipulations. But that's a good one. It's worth checking out. And then To Catch a Thief. Now, I must confess, I've not seen this in ages. But this was always one of the glamorous Hitchcocks. He's got Cary Grant in his peak Cary Grant. And Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly's, it's worth watching for Grace Kelly's costumes. She's just astonishing. She's just astonishingly glamorous. It's set on the Riviera. It's just fabulously glamorous. I think it's fairly light, but again, it's the kind of film they don't make now. A film jam-packed with incredible star power that's there purely to entertain. We just don't get films like that now. They've made crap like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which doesn't even come close, but that was fucking 20 years ago. Got The Man He Knew Too Much, which is the next year. James Stewart, obviously key Hitchcock collaborator. Doris Day, who actually works really well in this, she sings Que Sera. And it's got a fantastic sequence where it's following the musical score, classic Hitchcock set piece, and on the cymbal crash, that's when the assassin's going to fire. So he has this race against time, and we're following the music, and we can see the cymbal crash over there on the score. It's really clever. He actually remade this. He made this originally in 1934. And the other one was to make the cut, which some people might be surprised, is The Birds. I always loved this as a kid. I do like The Birds. It's just some elements of it don't work for me. I find the kind of Tippi Hedren's performance a little strange. She gets better. The electronic score by Herman's interesting. We'll come to him, Bernard Herrmann. But I think the problem for me is I like the ambiguity of The Birds, but I think the special effects looked a bit dated. But I think it's a bit self-consciously arty. By this point, he's kind of, he's a few years into his, Alfred Hitchcock, you're an auteur, and he's kind of deliberately trying to kind of be more open-ended, more European, kind of stranger, which is interesting. But I still like it. It's still got some chilling set pieces. It's pretty horrific. Okay, so that's the ones that didn't make the cut. There's other films Hitchcock worth seeing. They're all worth seeing in a way. Anyway, so in at number 10, I'm going for his second to last film, Frenzy. Really like this. Basically, Hitchcock, it's interesting this, it goes back to Hitchcock's London of old in a way. It's set in contemporary times, but he's got them going around the market stall, traders, and sort of, the Cockney geezer type thing. Obviously, Hitchcock grew up, I think, in East End of London. I could be wrong with that. And he would have known the marketplaces and the working class culture around London. So it's kind of old fashioned in that respect, but it's got this modern serial killer plot, the Necktie Strangler. It's got vicious black humour in this. There's the bit where the corpse, I forget the name of the actress, I think she's in Peeping Tom as well, and she's got the key in her hand and he has to get on the back of the truck and rigor mortis is set in. There's also the fantastic, horrible strangulation scene, but there's an amazing bit where the camera pulls out. It pulls out the studio shot down the stairs and it does a kind of match cut into the real street. And obviously something horrific's gone on and the camera pulls out and people are walking by going about their business and they don't know, what's happening behind closed doors. John Finch is really good. Plays, again, it's the wrong man plot. He gets accused or he's a suspect in the Necktie Strangler thing, but he's got a drink problem. Interesting actor, John Finch. Shame he didn't do more, really. And Barry Foster's great. Originally, I think he wanted Michael Caine, and Foster looks a bit like Michael Caine, but he's really good as the Strangler because he's got a lot of charm as well. There's the funny thing where the wife's making the dinners, experimental food for the copper, which is played by Alec McGowan, I think. Really good. One of my favourite Hitchcock cameos as well, when they're pulling the body out of the Thames and Hitch is there. Because he obviously cameoed in all his films. So that's my number 10 choice. My number 9 choice, sorry, I'm just looking at my list yet. Okay, so this is the film after The Birds. It's Marnie. So it's a very psychologically complex film. It's Sean Connery's probably first really big starring role other than James Bond. He was in a film called Women in a Straw as well. I think Connery's really good in it. It kind of takes his Bondish kind of bastardness and exploits that really well. Hitchcock's great with stars. He's great at using stars and getting different things out of them. You know, he didn't direct. I don't think he directed many stars to Oscar nomination. Obviously, Oscar win was Joan Fontaine with Suspicion, but to say he's a great director of actors is wrong, really. He famously called actors cattle, but he's just brilliant with stars, and some of the best star performances, star persona explorations are in Hitchcock films. This one, Tippi Hedren's superb in this. She would have been given an Oscar-worthy performance. Explore sort of childhood trauma. Again, Hitchcock tapping into the kind of analytical sort of film theory things perhaps a bit. Maybe starting to believe his sort of hype a bit with the auteur theory and so on. But still a really good film, good Bernard Herrmann score. Suffers from bad back protection, as does The Birds. By this point, Hitchcock films are technically kind of starting to look shoddy in places. And as your filmmakers come out of TV, like Sidney Lumet, John Frankenheimer, who using the more modern cameras, modern techniques, that is a problem with this film. But it's really good. I've always liked it. It's always had a kind of hold on me. So that's my number 9 choice. My number 8 choice is... Sorry, I'm just looking here at my numbers. Yes, it's Rope from 1948. So this is really good. This is, in some ways, this might be seen as a second level Hitchcock. So it's not one that immediately springs to mind when people talk about his work with James Stewart. And it comes in a kind of fallowish period for Hitch. He does Notorious in 46, and then this kind of Under Capricorn, Stage Fright. Films that don't do as well, he gets Strange on the Train, which does well, but then there's just a slightly quieter moment for him. But I really like this experiment with long takes. This is hugely influential. So many directors now do single takes. We have steady cams, we have lightweight equipment, we have the ability to edit digitally. But what Hitchcock did with this, he had all his camera choreographed so it could move around the apartment, and then he did disguise wipes so the camera would move across furniture after 10 minutes, and then it would cut to the next scene. But it gives the illusion of it being in one take. I'm not sure if it's a kind of like a deliberate cut at the end, so don't quote me on that. But basically, the reels of film would only run for 10 minutes. You have to rehearse with the actors, do all that, and then shoot his 10 minutes and do that. So again, what this shows is Hitchcock's brilliant planning. You know, he's a master planner, storyboarding, scripting, getting all his structure in. Really good performance by James Stewart. And this is based on the Leopold and Loeb case. Forget the name of there's the Orson Welles film from 59. Compulsion as well explores that. The two killers, into Nietzsche. It's John Dahl, who's really good, and Farley Granger, who have been Stranger on the Train. So this is a really good film. It's a technical... Hitchcock wanted a technical experiment. It's a really cool film. Okay, so that's Rope at number 8. Number 7, I'm going for Notorious from 1946. So I think this shows... Hitchcock's ability to utilise stars. Basically, Cary Grant, the most charming leading man ever, plays a bit of a coercive bastard in this, but he's Cary Grant. Ingrid Bergman is beautiful, but very vulnerable, and she's got a bit of a drink problem, and in some ways Grant is exploiting her to do spying. Then you've got Claude Rains as a kind of, under the thumb mummy's boy, and his mum's a kind of Nazi. And that's the thing as well, Hitchcock does where the villain, the sympathy for the villain. The end scene's fantastic when, Grant carries her out, and you can just see Rains in the doorway, awaiting his fate. But this is really good, and it features one of the great camera shots in film. So basically there's a crane shot, starts at the top of the stairs at a party, and it cranes down and goes through the sort of party and goes to a tight close-up on Ingrid Bergman's hand. She's got a key in it, and that is to unlock the cellar where the uranium ore is kept. So basically, Claude Rains is out in South America, he's working for the Nazis, something like that. I can't quite remember the plot now, but it's really good. And yeah, it's just, you just don't get star power like that. I mean, Cary Grant's whatever he thinks he's one of the greatest stars ever. And Cary Grant's brilliance was that he did this brilliant performance his whole every film, which was being Cary Grant. And Ingrid Bergman, I just can't, she's one of the great screen actresses, really. So yeah, superb. A big hit for Hitchcock. At number 6, I forgot Spellbound. Spellbound nearly made the cut. Again, that's a good second level Hitchcock, 1945. Ingrid Bergman's in that. Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck, not quite as successful with Hitchcock. Hitchcock didn't manage to probe his layers with him as much. But yeah, sorry, just slipping that in there. So yeah, number 6, Shadow of a Doubt. So this is really good. This is Hitchcock's favourite films that he made. Good one with this is, it's not got a big star in it, Joseph Cotton, popular actor at the time. But he plays the merry widow killer Uncle Charlie, and there's an actress called Teresa Wright, and he comes to stay Uncle Charlie, and then she starts to suspect that he's the merry widow killer. And it's really good. I think, did Fulton Wilder write it? He did Our Time. Did he do the script? Not sure. But it just basically explores that small town milieu. If you're looking for a sort of comparison, imagine David Lynch might have liked this. If you're looking to think about something like Blue Velvet, how you have this really shiny small town, and behind it is sinisterness. Sinisterness comes into it. Wells is The Stranger as well, from 1946. That's another film that explores, small town milieu, but evil being there. Really good. Great ending as well. And Charlie kind of, the truth doesn't come out, he dies, and Teresa Wright's character doesn't, spill the beans because she wants to preserve the facade. Number 5, I mentioned it before, Strangers on the Train. So I think this is Hitchcock. One of the themes he's doubling in Hitchcock films. The idea that two characters can kind of mirror each other, and this is a great film for doubling. So you've got the Farley Granger character who's doubled against Robert Walker. Farley Granger's girlfriend is kind of doubled. Ex-wife is kind of doubled against Farley Granger's new girlfriend. Farley Granger's new girlfriend's fiance's family, their kind of wealthy family, it's kind of mirrored against Robert Walker's family life as well. There's loads of cool stuff in this. There's the girl getting strangled, and then the strangulations that reflected in the glasses which are falling on the floor. There's the cigarette lighter sort of device as a kind of sort of MacGuffin evidence thing. And MacGuffin is something that drives the plot, not the cigarette lighter as a nonsense thing, but James Bond films use MacGuffins a lot. The climax is great with the guy going underneath. The guy actually going underneath the merry-go-round is actually a guy who worked. I think he worked on him, and he said, "Oh, I'll do it." The stuntman was too scared. He said, "Yeah, he'd done it before," and they said, "I'll just pay us this." So that's cool. It's brilliant. The opening's brilliant. You see their feet get out of the taxis, and it again, the doubling thing, it shows their dress and their shoes. Really good. The meet on the train. Trains are important in Hitchcock films. There's any number of things that are great in this film, but again, it doesn't use big stars. Robert Walker and Farley Granger are really good in this, but it's quite interesting for that. And that was a little bit of a comeback for Hitchcock. So the next one, at number 4, I'm going for Psycho. Okay, film that needs no introduction. One of the most famous films ever made. Hitchcock experimenting, shooting in black and white. The incredible shower scene. Forget how many number of camera setups there are on that. And then there's that amazing spinning camera dissolve. I mean, these are the sort of shots, if we saw them now, people are like, "Oh wow, that shot was amazing." But Hitchcock was doing all this stuff years ago. He's always drawn attention to this camera. He always drew attention to the fact, he's the master, and he's controlling. He's getting his camera operator, cinematographer to set up the shot and, perform it for him. Obviously, killing off the main star halfway through. Cross-training villain, streak of black humour in this as well. Always black comedy in Hitchcock. Amazing overhead shot, when Norman walks out and stabs Martin Balsam, and then him falling down the stairs, that weird perspective. Just one of the most famous films ever. and an influence on things like Jaws and any number of films. So number 3 is Rear Window. Sorry, my list's a bit dodgy. Yeah, so this is one of the earliest Hitchcocks I think I saw, and it's amazing, isn't it? A guy stuck in his bedroom or in his living room with a broken leg, but Hitchcock manages to make this really playful thriller out of it. James Stewart's amazing, and then he taps into that dark side of James Stewart, his voyeurism, and there's lots of layers to this, and obviously the one of the things to talk about is the apartment blocks across from James Stewart's character. Almost functions like a cinema screen. There's a bit where Grace Kelly comes in and almost presents herself to James Stewart, kind of, oh, what shall I wear? And for our next performance, I forget what the dialogue is, but it's kind of quite playful, because Grace Kelly's kind of presenting herself for him, but it's also for us. And then when she goes across, he's almost allured by it, because he's kind of like, oh, this girl's got loads of balls for want of expression, but then she's part of his cinema screen, and she's kind of becoming the sort of tension in his own visual narrative that he's looking at. A really good Raymond Burr Ironside's cool. The housekeepers at Estelle Parsons. This is an all-time classic. Again, it's kind of like when you talk about films, when you talk about cinema, this would be a film people will talk about tomorrow, and they'll be talking about it as long as there's humanity. Number 2, I'm going for North by Northwest, probably the most entertaining Hitchcock. Cary Grant at his brilliant best. Basically a forerunner to the James Bond films in a lot of ways. Certainly the crop dusting sequence, the way the action set pieces are played out. Grant, it's the classic wrong man plot, taken to some degree. Fantastic Bernard Herrmann score, and those brilliant diagonal lines on the credit sequence by Saul Bass, which basically I think it's kind of match cuts into the UN building, the overhead shot. Really good. James Mason, superb again, predating how like a Bond villain might be, very urbane, inviting. There's a bit where they're kind of almost, he doesn't dine Cary Grant, but he's amazing, Mason, in this. And Eve Marie Saint does a great job as well. Typically you might expect Grace Kelly, another Hitchcock blonde, but she's kind of got more about her in some ways. She seems like she can handle herself more. Brilliant film, and just so entertaining. You got the great, phallic image of the train going into the tunnel at the end. Again, the Bond copies Hitchcock, particularly his train seductions. Roger Moore, Sparlow, he's got a train scene, as is Live and Let Die, Spectre. So you can see its influence on things like that. So yeah, let's just go back through the top 10 then. So Frenzy 10, Marnie 9, 8, Rope 7, Notorious 6, Shadow of a Doubt, 5, Strangers on the Train, 4, Psycho, 3, Rear Window, and 2, North by Northwest. So number 1, anyone who knows me probably won't be surprised by that. It's 1958's Vertigo, starring James Stewart and Kim Novak. So this film, BFI was recently, I think on the BFI or Sight and Sound, voted it the greatest film ever, actually supplanted Citizen Kane. Whatever your feelings about Citizen Kane or Vertigo are, whether you like them or not, these are hugely influential films. And Vertigo, a good example of Vertigo is Paul Verhoeven, the Dutch director, saw it 25 times. And you can see the influence on Vertigo, even though it's kind of potboiler on Basic Instinct. It's a hugely influential film. I think not just the visual style, the way the music's used, the score by Bernard Herrmann is maybe perhaps the greatest score ever written for a film. That incredible the credit sequence is amazing, and the way it has the eye, and at the end of the credit sequence it actually has the close-up of the eye, and then it says directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and in a way it's through his eyes, his camera, that we will see. It's got the Vertigo shot, the trombone shot. It's ethereal, this film. It's kind of haunting. The first time I saw it was when I was about 15, and I wouldn't have thought it'd be a film I enjoyed, but it's kind of had a hold on me. It's had a hold on me since then. I probably don't go back to it as much as I used to, but maybe in a few years' time I will do. But it works on a lot of levels. I think the back projection works really well on this film as well. Sometimes back projection would be jarring with Hitchcock, but with this, there's a certain quality to it that it gives it that dreamlike quality. But yeah, this film, you know, the graphics, the camera work, the themes, the idea that you can make a kind of thriller but with really dark underlying themes, obsession. And I think James Stewart's performance is the best of a Hitchcock leading man. I think Hitchcock, like Anthony Mann in Anthony Mann Westerns, he gets something out of Stewart, which is and you know, that darkness that's tapped into in It's a Wonderful Life as well. It's this idea that, you know, Stewart's kind of seen as an all-American guy, but he's kind of what I love about it is he's just completely uncertain. He's quite traumatized, you know, by what he's experienced, and there's an uncertainty and a desperation to him. And he actually behaves really badly, although he's been treated badly as well. But yeah, so that's my number one, is Vertigo. That was my top 10 Alfred Hitchcock films. The master of suspense, still as vital today as he was all those years ago. Cheers, thanks so much.